Welcome to ZyPod, where jets, crypto, court rulings, and heat waves all get weird. A president tied to billions, a luxury jet with national security side-eye, a crypto token that left regular people holding the bag, and a Supreme Court that somehow managed to be messy and clarifying at the same time. Also, Europe is melting, the West is burning, and GTA 6 might be the biggest entertainment launch on Earth. The wildest money story is still Trump world, where filings and press reconstructions say Trump and family pulled in roughly 2% to $2.3 billion in 2025 across stocks, licensing, crypto, and real estate-linked deals. And it's not just the scale reports, describe around 21,000 stock trades in a year, which is about 80 trades a trading day, plus trades allegedly timed before policy announcements. If that's true, that is the kind of detail that makes ethics lawyers start pacing. Then you add Gulf licensing fees, with documented figures like $11.7 million in Dubai, $10 million in Abu Dhabi, and $9.2 million in Saudi Arabia, and the conflict of interest questions basically write themselves. The most text-your-friend part might be World Liberty Financial, the Trump-linked token that reporting describes as a pump-and-dump disaster. Reconstructions say family entities got something like $616 million, while public holders were down roughly 75 to 76% by mid-2026. That is an absolutely brutal split between insiders and everyone else. At the same time, reporting around a Qatari-provided Boeing 747-8 triggered a whole separate ethics panic, because even if official disclosures show much smaller gift totals on paper, critics are focused on the real value of aircraft, travel, refurbishment, and influence. It's one of those stories where the receipt says one thing and the vibe says, come on. There's also a genuinely grim subplot around pardons and immunity. Media reports and whistleblower claims describe internal talk of very large clemency pushes, even proposals tied to America 250, plus this alleged culture of pardon expectations around Oval Office access. And critics are pushing allegations of possible pay-for-pardon schemes, with some reports citing figures as low as $2 million for a pardon. Formal proof and final outcomes are still contested, but the mere fact this is a recurring allegation is extraordinary. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court had one of those terms where every decision seems to rearrange some part of the machinery. The biggest clean headline is birthright citizenship. The court reaffirmed that almost all children born on U.S. soil are citizens under the 14th Amendment, rejecting the administration's attempt to narrow that by parentage. It also said geofence phone warrants are Fourth Amendment searches, which is a huge privacy ruling because your phone is basically a diary with GPS and a battery. On elections, the court allowed states to keep counting ballots that were postmarked by Election Day, but arrived later, and it also loosened limits on coordination between candidates and party committees, which means even more money and more targeted spending flying around politics. So the same court gave law enforcement less room to dragnet your location, and gave campaign finance more room to get even more obnoxious, very on brand for modern America. Outside the US, the Iran story is the one markets keep staring at because every strike, drone response, and commercial vessel attack raises the same question. Could the Strait of Hormuz get disrupted? That choke point matters for a huge share of seaborne oil, so even the fear of closure can slam energy markets and everybody's wallet. What makes it even more absurd is the diplomatic theatre around Doha, where US envoys were reportedly presenting talks as mediation, while Iran's delegation didn't even show up. Qatar confirmed the absence, and suddenly the whole thing looked less like diplomacy and more like a stage set. There were also allegations of businessmen using Doha trips to pitch murky investment funds tied to possible sanctions relief. Nothing says global stability like trying to turn brinkmanship into a roadshow. Ukraine's war is looking more and more like an aerial war layered on top of a frozen ground war. Ukraine has intensified long-range drone strikes on Russian oil and logistics targets, while Russia has answered with massive air assaults on Ukrainian cities, including reports of an 11-hour attack on Kyiv using hundreds of drones and ballistic missiles. Europe, for its part, is shifting from symbolic support to industrial support, with fresh defense funding and more emphasis on actually ramping production lines. In Gaza, the humanitarian picture remains awful. Reporting cited more than 15,000 people waiting for medical evacuation, and at least 300 reported to have died while waiting, with shortages of medicine and equipment under movement restrictions. This is one of those stories where bureaucracy itself becomes part of the casualty count. Back home, the economy keeps doing that infuriating split-screen thing, where markets look one way and regular life looks another. June payrolls reportedly rose by just 57,000. The labour force fell by around 700,000, and unemployment ticked up to about 4.2%. That is not a collapse, but it is definitely not a victory lap. Then there's housing, where median home prices are roughly 5 times median household income, compared with the old affordable benchmark, closer to 3 to 1. First-time buyers are down to about 21% of purchases, with the average first-time buyer around 40%. And yes, there's bipartisan interest in doing something, but one affordability bill aimed at supply and investor buying reportedly got blocked amid leverage politics over a separate voter ID fight. So the housing crisis continues its long career as everybody's favourite thing to discuss and nobody's favourite thing to solve. The AI economy also has 2 completely different movies playing at once. In one version, investors are warning about an AI bubble, hyperscalers are overbuilding data centers, and excess GPU capacity could end up creating a second-hand compute market and an ugly correction. In the other version, towns are saying, absolutely not. You are not dropping a giant power-hungry, water-hungry data center next to us. Projects like the one in Utah have sparked bipartisan local backlash and even knocked officials out of office. That's the real twist. AI may be sold as cloud magic, but eventually it lands in somebody's county with noise, substations, and a very annoyed planning board. The climate beat is basically screaming right now. The western US is staring at a severe wildfire season after a dry winter and rapid warming, while Europe is dealing with record heat and thousands of heat-related deaths. Air conditioning gaps in parts of Europe suddenly look less like a lifestyle quirk and more like a public health emergency. Grid operators are already warning that AC demand and giant AI loads are squeezing margins during heat waves, which is a very modern sentence and not a comforting one. On the bright side, scientists found the first dinosaur bone from Antarctica, a tiny titanosaur tail vertebra from about 82 million years ago, which is delightful because even in a cursed news cycle, a babyish polar dinosaur can still win the room. Before I go on, ridiculous entertainment statistic reports around GTA 6 claim more than $1 billion in pre-order revenue and trailer views in the neighborhood of 450 million in a day. If those numbers hold up, that's not just a game launch, that's a weather system. That's it for ZytePod. If the week feels like too much, fair enough. At least the Antarctic dinosaur was chill. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.